go ping. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kat, and I'm here to talk to you about mental health. So thank you for joining me. It's always a fun topic to talk about. Just to warn you, my 3-year-old is sat right there on an iPad. So if you hear some familiar CBeebies sounds, I apologise. He's my other half's unfortunately sick, so I'm sort of trying to manage two things, and he may demand I come and play on his game, which I'm going to have to ignore. So I wanted to come and talk to you a little bit about mental health because I have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety since I was 19. That's 20 years for me. But I also recognise with a bit of hindsight that I probably certainly had issues with anxiety at the very least from much, much younger. And I think it's really important that we talk a little bit more about mental health. We talk a little bit more about it for the sake of ourselves, for the sake of others, and for the children that we work with, because especially since the pandemic, we are seeing more and more cases in primary school and in secondary school. I know there's been a lot of problems even before the pandemic that there were mental health issues. So I wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about how mental health manifests and what it looks like, because I think there's sort of this mistaken vision that mental health is feeling a bit sad, and I don't think that's really true. There's lots of other things that go on in the background. So for me, I stopped wanting to go out. I made a lot of excuses. I was in my first year at university when I was first diagnosed, when I first had a major depressive incident, what I call a major depressive incident. And by the end of the year, when I came home, I attempted to harm myself. It wasn't really a suicide attempt per se. It was more, I want somebody to notice me, but if I happened to not die, it wouldn't matter. And that was what was going through my head at the time, which is terrifying to think back on now, because obviously I'm not feeling that way. But it's something I've had it several times in my life, this feeling that if I died, if I wasn't with us anymore, who would care? It wouldn't matter to anyone. And that's sort of a key thing to mental health. You've got this almost this voice in your head telling you that nobody thinks you matter, you're not important, without you things would be easier. And I'm talking about it very bluntly, because if I think about what I'm saying, I will start crying. So it's really difficult to talk about, really difficult to think about. And for me, I had some therapy recently that's helped me understand a little bit more about why I am the way I am, about some of my destructive behaviors and why I've got them. And that's been really helpful. So I would say, if you are struggling, don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to seek help, because the difference it's made just having that deeper level of understanding to my life recently has been amazing. And that's only been in the last 2 years since I had therapy. And I had therapy when I was younger, but it wasn't the right fit. And that's quite important to note. You do need to find the right fit. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the symptoms that I get, because it is beyond just that feeling sad. I get obviously the anxious and depressive thoughts. For me, the most common one is that people don't really like me. There we go. What I've learned, and what I actually went to a session about this week, was that you can't control what other people think about you. And it's a really difficult thing for someone like me, because I'm quite high functioning anxiety. I want to control everything, and I can't control what other people think about me. And in my heart, I think that if I just do this, they'll like me. And that builds up in my head. And I sort of think, well, I've done something wrong. I must have done something wrong. And actually, quite often, people are, they don't like you because, or they do like you and you're just getting the wrong feelings, but quite often they don't like you because of their own mental problems, because of their own thoughts and feelings. And sometimes people just judge. And actually, what you need to think about is, I don't care what those people think. What I do care about is that I've got people who see me as I am. I'm not pretending to be someone else. I'm just seeing, I was given this wonderful card that says, I'd rather appear strange to you than be a stranger to myself. And that's quite apt. And I think it's something Louise Petous used to say, we're all like-minded wackos. And that's part of the innovator mindset. Most people in this group, in this innovator group, accept each other for what we are. We are all friendly. We're all accepting. There's no competitive edge. But beyond those mental symptoms, there are a lot of physical symptoms. So for me, the thing that triggered my support in lockdown was that I was getting incredible migraines. I was doing a headache log because they wanted to investigate things, and it was every single day I was getting, at the very least, a mild headache, and generally a full-blown migraine with all the aura and everything else, and sometimes even vomiting. I get skin conditions, I get psoriasis and eczema and God knows what else when I'm struggling with my mental health, and they come first. Then I get the mental health problems, and I get IBS and stomach pains, which is really fun. So I'll just be eating something and my stomach will start cramping for no apparent reason, and then a month later I'll get the depressive symptoms after a month of stomach pains and cramp. So I think it's really important that you're aware that mental health isn't just mental. It causes a physical impact. I get more tired. I don't want to get out of bed. I'm lethargic. I don't want to eat, or I eat just junk food. That's always a good sign for me. I'd say good sign, always a key sign. I just want to eat chips and chocolate and ice cream, which sounds great, but it's a sign that my body is just in a mess. My brain doesn't know what it's doing. So I always like to share this infographic when I'm talking about mental health, and it's a lady on Twitter called on Instagram called Worry Wellbeing, and she does a lot of sketches like this. And she's actually recently released a book of all the sketches she's done about her mental health battles and about how to support other people. But I think this is a really telling one because it feels I'm sure lots of people will recognize some of these symptoms from during lockdown. To me, it feels like this is me in a nutshell. As I said, he would come and join me. I can't do your game at the moment, darling. So I think if you don't have a chance, I would bookmark this page. I'll send you the link in a bit, but definitely worth keeping an eye on this one in yourself and in other people. So I'm just going to stop for a moment and let you all think on your mental health, because I always like to do, and my friends here who are part of Global GG will recognise the Ducky scale. And I found this really useful because when we were doing Global GG staff room in lockdown, everyone would come in, would be full of energy, we'd be chatting, we'd be having a giggle, and then I'd hold up one of these on the scale and ask people which one best represents them. And it always surprised me that the people who'd been quite often the most chatty, the most enthusiastic, the most energetic would then say 8 or 9 because they were holding it all in. And it's something that we do a lot, people who struggle with their mental health. We put on a brave face. When I'm struggling, you wouldn't know it. Only the people closest to me would see what's wrong with me because I will be pushing out the most enthusiastic, the most energetic, the most happy person. So in the chat, I want you just to look at that ducky and really think about at the moment which one resonates with you right now at this moment in time. And it may not be what you think it's going to be. So I am currently probably at a 3 because I feel mostly okay, but my partner's ill. And I feel like there's a dark cloud that's probably going to launch. And realistically, you need to use this as a reflection for yourself. If you are above a 3, then maybe there is some underlying things going on. Maybe there's not. But just take a moment for self-reflection and use it to check in with yourself. And this works really well with students as well. I quite often use it with, for example, with I was jumping ahead of myself because my son is tapping the screen because he's used to touchscreen devices. Abid, I'm really pleased to hear it's the first time he's not been a 7, 8 or 9 as well. But what you can do with this is you can use a Jamboard and put some dots and ask children to move the dot to the right one. You could do it as an anonymous Google form. You could do it as a named Google form, but sometimes students don't want to be honest about their mental health. And it's more about reflecting. We want them to think about what's going on inside. We want adults, we want learners to be reflective. And now my child has discovered how to use the roller on my mouse. So these are UK statistics, but just also England statistics, but 1 in 4 people will experience mental health each year. That's a quarter of us. So there are 15 people in this room. That means probably 3 or 4 of us will struggle with our mental health. And 1 in 6 people report a common mental health problem in any given week. So in the next week, at least 2 people in this room potentially will struggle with anxiety or depression. That's a lot. And if you think about that in terms of school statistics, certainly older teenagers, they fall into those statistics. In terms of suicide and self-harm, and particularly self-harm is much more common than we realise. So it's a way that a lot of anxious people deal with lack of control. I mentioned before, I like to be in control. Women are more likely to have suicidal thoughts, but men are more likely to act on them. So 1 in 5 people have those suicidal thoughts. And as I said to you, it's not just, I want to kill myself. Sometimes it's that feeling of, if I do this dangerous thing, it wouldn't matter if I died. If I did that, maybe people would notice me more, but also maybe I'll be gone and I won't have to worry. 1 in 14 people self-harm, and 1 in 15 people attempt suicide, which is quite a lot. Yeah, there's a lady on Instagram who I follow called Anna Mather, and she talks a lot about intrusive thoughts. And she talks about, and she's particularly talking about motherhood, that feeling that you're stood at the top of the stairs holding your baby, and part of you wants to chuck them down the stairs, and you'd never do it, but that thought is in the back of your mind. So bear with me. Or you're standing on a bridge and you can imagine yourself jumping off the bridge, and you're not going to do it, but that intrusive thought is there. And intrusive thoughts are not a sign that you're a bad person. They're just part of being human. Like there's a bridge in Chiswick, the Hogarth flyover, I think it's called. And every time I'm driving over it, I can see myself driving off the side. And it's terrifying, but it's called an intrusive thought. It's not something I'm actually going to do. And it's very, very common. So now I know that. I no longer think I'm completely crazy. It's also worth noting that the figures and statistics don't take into account people in hospitals, prisons, sheltered housing. So those are people quite often struggling with their mental health, or even homeless and rough speaking. So there's a lot going on in terms of people's health. I'm going to give you a moment to be reflective again. What I want you to all do, you don't have to type this in the chat, but you can. If you are going to type it in the chat, don't hit enter. Type it, but don't hit enter. And I want you to write down, either in the chat on a piece of paper, one thing that you're going to do in the next 24, in the next week. One thing you're going to do for yourself, whether that be have a bath, read a book, eat some chocolate, book a spa day. I've booked myself a spa treatment in early December. Are you going to go out for dinner by yourself? Do something for you, not for your family, not for your friends, not for your children, but for yourself. I want you to write that in the chat. If you feel comfortable doing so, don't feel like you have to. And then I'm going to ask you in 5 seconds, we're all going to hit enter if you've got them. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, post. Lovely. Sleeping, fishing, sketchnoting. Oh, I like the idea, Georgina, of sketchnoting over jazz music. And it's really important that we set those small, targetable, achievable goals for ourselves and do them, because as empathetic human beings, our instinct is to help other people first. And that's not actually the right thing to do. We need to help ourselves, because if we burn out, if we're exhausted, we can't be the person we should be. It was one of the reasons I actually left full-time teaching, because I could feel I wasn't being the best teacher I could be. I knew I needed a break from that, because otherwise I wasn't going to be the teacher that my children needed. So I know it's hard to accept, but it's really important that you put yourself first every so often. No matter what you do things for yourself. So just a few last points for me. I'm aware this has been quite short, but I thought I'd keep it short and snappy. There are going to be lots of people around you that are struggling with their mental health, and they may not have even realized it yet. Remember what I said earlier, just because someone is outwardly happy, it doesn't mean that they're okay. I often say this to people. I come across, to most people, before I started doing all the mental health talks, I come across as being a very loud, confident, exuberant, and always smiling person. I'm not always smiling. A lot of the time, that the more smiley and excitable I am, the less happy I am, the less okay I am. So be conscious of that with other people as well. That person who's bouncing around, it might be that they're bouncing around to cover what's going on. We look at famous people like Robin Williams. Nobody knew what was going on with him. So be conscious. Just because somebody looks happy, it doesn't mean they are. If you do somebody struggling, don't start telling them what to do. Just smile, just do some yoga, go for a walk. Listen to what they need, because more often than not, we kind of know what we need, but we need someone to help us with that, if that makes sense. So listen, ask. Provide low stakes opportunities to speak. There's nothing worse than having someone who's your boss saying to you, tell me what's wrong. Why aren't you doing your thing properly? You need low stakes. You need that opportunity, do you want to talk? Don't worry if you, let's just sit for a bit. Because, I mean, in the UK, certainly at the moment, there's an emphasis on mental health, but it's too often, as we said this week, it's a box ticking exercise. How is your health? How do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And there's no opportunity there to actually share what's really going on. So you need those opportunities with somebody comfortable. And also just be aware that if someone's struggling with their mental health, we're likely to push. I push people away. It's taken me a long time to get to a point where I feel comfortable talking about how I feel. What I used to do was tell everyone to leave me alone. And I know that's true of some other people here. It's a coping mechanism, it's a defense, but one thing I find is that you need to feel as though even if you push someone away, I know it's hard, but still be there for me, still say, I'm here if you need me, but I'll leave you for now. Because that, just knowing that the lifeline is there can make a huge difference if somebody's at a real low. And that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to be able to share these slides afterwards, but I've got some links. Calm and Headspace both occasionally offer free access for teachers, so it's worth looking at them. They're both apps for mental health and well-being. In the UK, we have the Samaritan's Mind and the School Mental Health Award. As the Samaritans and Mind are directly for access, and I'm sure in other countries there are other sites and other phone lines and things like that. So they're directly for mental health support. Mind is brilliant because, School Mental Health Award is something that's international. You can apply to have your school acknowledged as a good centre for mental health, and so it's worth looking at. I think you pay a small fee, you take part in the training and the course, and then they assess your school. So it's more than box ticking. It really is making sure your school is a safe place for somebody to be if they struggle with their mental health. We've got a couple of minutes left, and then I think it's time to move on to the next one. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute, have a chat, say something. It's entirely up to you. Otherwise, we can start winding down. And so this is something I do. I am more than happy to share my mental health journey with anybody who'll listen. So please feel free to get in touch. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me have my catharsis and for putting up with my 3-year-old jumping in and asking me to play on his iPad.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you for sharing with us. I know this is a session you're particularly keen to do and offer people on a topic that's really important to you. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I hope the rest of Spark Camp Saturday goes well.